Hey everyone. Good to see you all. She Ethel Branchin Cha Bipatwani Nishla, Nakai Bashchin, Sinujini Desha Che, Aro Nakai Dashanala, She Deneba Washington Bi Agati Da Itso. And it's great to be here with everyone on this gorgeous Friday in Window Rock. Looking forward to a beautiful weekend ahead and enjoying the festivities of Gallup Intertribal Ceremonials. I hope to see you all in the parade tomorrow. And I hand things over to Deputy Attorney General Heather Claw.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Heather Claw, Deputy Attorney General. I'm Kiani, born for Clash Chi'i. My Chase are Tota Chi'ni, and my Nellies are Tachini. Families originally from Upper Fruitland area, Burnham, and also Herfino area. My mom's family is from Whitehorse Lake area, so it's been great an opportunity to be here and I'm excited to just have a discussion on some of the things that we're giving an update with and any questions that come up, we're willing to go ahead and answer those too as well. Thank you, AG.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think one of the things I wanted to give an update on is the status of our water settlements. So those thankfully are continuing to move forward in a positive way. We just had the president testify at a House Natural Resources Committee hearing in late July. Did a great job with the written testimony and the verbal testimony. We had speaker there, Delegate Slater, and First Lady, and it was really nice to have that opportunity. After the hearing, a bunch of folks went around office to office, meeting with the Arizona delegation and just reinforcing shared commitment by all of the parties to move the settlement forward. The House hearing was really focused on Indian water rights exclusively, and there are quite a few Indian water rights settlements that are moving forward right now. A lot of tribes are really looking to lock in their allocations and their enforceable water rights before the end of this Congress, because we all see that this is a favorable environment, not only to get our settlements across the finish line, but also just given the existing climate conditions, things are intensifying. During the course of our negotiations, we saw molecules disappear, and there just wasn't water on the table the way it has been in the past because the water's just not in the river anymore. So that was one of the challenges of the negotiations, and that, of course, makes it more urgent to make sure that these water rights are secured now, the enforceable water rights are secured now. So there wasn't enough space in the hearing room or on the agenda to have everyone testify. So we would have loved to have had representatives from the state of Arizona testifying, or SRP, CAWCD, the other tribes as well. In fact, we had one spot because Navajo Nation had 4 pieces, or it does have 4 pieces of water rights related legislation before the House. And so we use that time to address all of our legislations, including Arizona. But technically, the Arizona spot was given to Hopi tribe. They did a great job of testifying. We would have loved to have had San Juan Southern Paiute up there as well. But again, because of the limitations and so many tribes, over a dozen tribes, trying to finalize and gain a House and Senate approval for their settlements, there just wasn't the ability to do that. So when we did go around the Hill, meeting with the Arizona delegation, trying to ensure full support from the full Arizona delegation, we were joined by the state parties and some of the other parties as well, including SRP, CAWCD, and Dave Brown, who represents, he likes to say, 25 of the 39 parties. So quite a segment of the settling parties in the Arizona water rights settlement. And so we went around meeting with folks on the Senate side as well as the House side. It was really great. We're blessed to have really strong sponsors. Representative Siscomani was fantastic, and it's been a pleasure to work with in moving this forward. We met with Representative Gallego, who also, is always there to support the nation and is offering his strong support here as well. We met with Senator Kelly's staff and Senator Sinema as well, and she reiterated her support and commitment for the settlement. So it was a really strong week. And we also had meetings with the White House and with Bureau of Reclamation. And that was really right after we hosted the commissioner from the Bureau of Reclamation here at Navajo Nation. She spent a whole day with us. She's quite a champ. She stuck with us for over 12 hours. We even, yeah, it was really fun.
That tour that you had. I mean, I think I would like to if you could share a little bit what the importance of that and hoping what we were to accomplish, because I think a lot of people are questioning, why are we still going off on this side when we have a settlement in going on through the congressional. But I just kind of wanted to have if you could share a little bit of understanding of why it was important for us to continue to gather information and still head towards like we're litigating.
Well, the tour with the commissioner was really important because she is sort of the third likely person to be testifying before Congress. And she manages the Colorado River. And so, making sure that she fully understands the significance of our settlement, what it means to the Navajo people in order to gain access to especially Colorado River water. It was really great. We brought her to my mom's house, actually. She got to haul water with her and meet some of the neighbors, almost all of whom are elderly Navajo women who are hauling water and raising livestock, many of them raising their grandchildren. And so it was just really incredible for her to see. And one of the comments that one of the BOR staff members, actually Deputy Assistant Secretary Gary Gold, made was, you hear the statistics and you hear like people are having to drive this many miles to get their water. But what you don't understand with that statistic is how rough the roads are, essentially. It's not like you're jumping on pavement and driving 12 miles to get water. Like, you're driving very rugged roads. And the wear and tear on your vehicle makes it break down much more quickly. So one of the things that we reference in our advocacy is the cost of accessing water for a family that hauls water. And it's so much higher than just someone paying their water bills. I think one of the estimates we cited in the testimony was like $600 a month for water. And, my water bill in Flagstaff was only like $25 a month. So you can just see how disproportionately impacted water haulers are in terms of having access to water, just with that data alone. So it was really eye-opening and really important. One of the things that Congress looks to when they're passing these water rights settlements is the view of the United States. And specifically, that's usually the view of the Department of Interior, as well as the Department of Justice. And so to have someone like the commissioner, who is part of the small group that is at the decision-making table on what view or what type of testimony the United States is going to provide when it comes to these settlements, it was very, very important for her to sort of have that on the ground knowledge and experience to be able to guide the opinion and the view of the United States in a way that will be a benefit to the water haulers that she met on her trip, and which is just such a small segment of the Navajo population. And of course, we're always educating, like a third of our people have this experience. They're having to haul their water. They don't have streaming access to clean and reliable, safe drinking water like other Americans. And on the trip, people were able to, Navajo community members were able to talk about how hard things were during the pandemic, in terms of having access to water, whether it's drinking water or just water to wash your hands regularly with. So it was a really beneficial experience, and I'm just thankful to the commissioner for sticking with us for the day. She started out in Loop, and then we were able to take her to Dilcon, where she could see the new medical center there. And then we took her up to former Bennett Freeze area to Botaway Gap chapter and Copper Mine. She saw where a new clinic is being built there and a new well had been built. And so it was just a great experience. And then at the end of the day, the local chapters really spoiled her with a mutton feast. They had ribs and all kinds of delicious goodies for her. So it was a really, really great way. And there were a lot of really great things that led into the hearing. We had that signing ceremony as well. That was really awesome to see all of the coming together of the parties and expression or re-emphasis on how committed everyone is to moving the settlement forward. And then having the commissioner out that Friday. So I think we went into that next week really strong. And now, so, in terms of what the question we always get is, where are things in the process and what does the timeline look like? There is some confusion on, do we have a settlement right now? And so I guess it's complicated, right? Things that are legal are often complicated. So it's really a process in terms of getting that final settlement in place. So the first phase was really just reaching a negotiation, a mutually agreeable settlement through negotiations with all of the settling parties. And that's the 39 parties from the LCR adjudication. And many of whom, well, not many, but some of whom also had claims to the Upper Basin. And so, we were able to complete that process in May. And then all three tribal councils unanimously passed approving legislation for the settlement to move it forward. So that was kind of the second most important step. So one, getting an actual agreement that everyone agrees to, and then two, getting formal approval by the signing parties, and then three is getting this through Congress. And once it gets through Congress, and Congress in their legislation, they may not accept the settlement the way all the parties have approved it. They may have some changes, like the dollar amount could change. Right now, it's at $5 billion, which is huge. But actually, it's when you think about how many people it's going to benefit, it's not really that big. But getting congressional approval, once that's done, then we're going to have to conform the settlement agreement the people have signed at this point. So basically amend that to stay within the boundaries of what Congress authorizes. So if the dollar amount changes, that would be something that we would change in the settlement agreement, and then people would re-execute or re-sign the agreement in its final form. And then we would have to file that. The next phase is to actually get the final decree from the court. And we have two adjudications we're dealing with. There's the LCR adjudication, but we also settled our rights in the Gila River Basin. That has a live adjudication. So we'd also have to get the final settlement entered into a final decree in that court. So it's a long process, but again, you can think of it as those 4 steps, right? Getting the agreement that all the parties are good with, and then getting formal approval by their governing bodies, and then the congressional approval, and then, the final decree from the court. So yeah, so it's a process.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate the breakdown on that to see, and I think that's what the people also need to understand is what the process is and where the process is out at. And it is a long, tedious process. I think I was pretty proud to see the leadership, Navajo Nation leadership, going to Congress, advocating on Navajo Nation's behalf, especially in such a team effort. You know, a lot of times. Navajo, we tend to kind of break away when pressure gets heavy. And I was pretty excited to see the speaker, you know, other delegates that were part of that, the president, and to be able to go ahead and understand that, hey, there's a process to this. We all want to speak up a little bit regarding it, but like you said, there's limited space in there, and the federal government has their own formalities that unfortunately we have to go ahead and obey. But I thought it looked very well organized on Navajo. So I definitely like to appreciate President, Speaker, and the leadership that represented the Navajo Nation, because I know how big this is. I think this is what the third or fourth time we've been trying to get this water settlement through. And and so it is an effort, and it's something that's desperately needed for the nation to go ahead and have water security. So thank you for heading that, AJ. You and the team that you worked with, the Water Rights Unit, and the Navajo Nation leadership. This was definitely something that I was privileged to, you know, be on the side to watch happen and see what's going on. So thank you for everybody's effort on that part.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for keeping things going at the Department of Justice. There was a period where it require a lot of in-person participation on my part. And so Deputy was here steering the wheel at the department, making sure things were handled. And there was a lot going on. There was a lot of ARPA stuff going on. I don't know if you want to give an update on that.
Well, where are we at with the ARPA? I think, again, the leadership is doing a really good job to figure. I think a lot of the criticism people see is that why aren't you spending this much money? I mean, it's quite a bit of money to spend. It's a system that the nation, I think, is giving an opportunity to look and reevaluate our system internally, to really take a hard look. If we're able to, why is the process takes so long to get in order to spend money? And I think that has been a good lesson for the nation. And I believe, like, Office of the Controller, as well as the leaderships, are really looking at those processes, what is actually needed and what's really holding us and have an opportunity to spend this. Again, and then the leadership got together and said, okay, let's really look at what the federal process is. What can we do in order to go ahead and preserve the money so we can go ahead and benefit further, in order to go ahead and see if we can make sure and get things taken care of. And then they're doing it with the 521 fund. I think that was a creative, smart way to be able to look at what we have and to preserve the things that we need. So definitely give the Office of Controller, Budget and Finance, President's Office, and all those involved the kudos that they deserve in order to go ahead and smartly think about these things. How do we preserve this? So I think that's what we're working on moving forward, is creating the 521 so that we can preserve some of that money in order for it to utilize it for infrastructure. How do we go ahead and continue to improve the Navajo Nation? So.
Great. And so folks know we did have a lunch and learn dedicated to the 521 plan earlier in the month of July. I think it might have been the first one in July. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please tune in for that. And of course, the 521 plan is still being implemented, and it's still underway and taking shape. So stay tuned, I guess, for more information on that once we have a better sense for what that will actually fund and how soon those projects forward. So yeah, definitely an exciting opportunity. There are a lot of needs, especially for governmental facilities. I mean, like at the Department of Justice, as we know very well, dealing with some facilities challenges. So,
You know,
but
we just got done with the interns, and the interns, they were so sweet and cute. You know, I appreciate the group that we had because they're rolling with the punches. I had them doing an evaluation, and one of the things that definitely stood out was facilities. You know, they were. It was nice to be in a tribal setting, and an area, but we had to move them twice because we had some issues with mice and rodents in one end. Then we wanted to make sure our employees are safe, so we had to close a whole unit, which put the interns into a conference room, and so that we can have enough offices for our other staff. And we're still dealing with that right now because we're having to do the extermination, the cleaning efforts, and then moving forward. And then we're going to have to look at possibly shutting the whole building down in order to do the extermination and then the cleaning. And then where do we put our staff? And I definitely think that this is not just limited to Department of Justice. I mean, these are the Navajo Nation tribal buildings all across. So what do we really do to look at infrastructure in that way? And get all on the same page of how that infrastructure should be planned and move forward. I think that's the challenge that we have on the Navajo Nation. Well, I guess the leadership on the Navajo Nation, because the money does go through them and they make a decision on how to spend the money. So, but you know, we make do. We understand when we come to work for the nation that sometimes things aren't comfortable. Sometimes things are a challenge. And that's why I do appreciate any tribal employees that come in and work for the nation, because you do have to roll with the punches, you know. And I'm grateful that they do that. So, but you know, like you said, it's also a wonderful reward too as well. So I think those are some of the logistical challenges that we have run in at the Department of Justice, but specifically at the Department of Justice. But I'm sure it's definitely not a single situation. But that's all I know about that I'm seeing and handling. But I know it's across the nation too as well.
yeah, definitely. I think one of the other, well, actually, I didn't finish the updates on the water because I mentioned there are 4 pieces of legislation. So the other huge water thing that's moving forward right now is, of course, our New Mexico settlement for the Rio San Jose Basin as well as Rio Puerco Basin. So that's kind of like, I would say like around the Torreon area and then all the way down to Continental Divide, like through area, including Tohajale. And that's a region that's pretty challenged in terms of water quality right now, well, even water supply. And so the settlement is really about importing water and making sure that those communities have access to clean drinking water and even being able to extend some of the water that is being pulled from the San Juan River into the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project and being able to bring it to additional Navajo communities that are outside of the applicable basins. So that is really, really important, and it affects a lot of people, not just Navajo people, but people non-Navajos like Jicarilla. Well, actually, maybe it doesn't involve Jicarilla, but definitely the city and communities, the non-Indian communities in the region. So. But that is moving forward as well. At this time, we just have the House legislation for that. We're hoping to get the Senate legislation soon. We actually have a really narrow congressional window to work with, and that's been one of our challenges and why we've been pushing so hard to, finalize the negotiations and get approvals in place because we do face a federal election. There could be a change in administration at the federal level, change in the composition of the House and the Senate, and who knows what it's going to look like in terms of Indian water settlements going forward. We know what the conditions are now. We know that settlements are moving right now in this Congress, and so we want to make sure that we are one of that our settlements are part of those settlements that move forward before the end of the year, before the end of the Congress. But with the unusual nature of election season this year, particularly the presidential election, we face this really strange situation where, Congress is on their usual August recess. So that's a period in which we won't be able to get the New Mexico legislation dropped in the Senate. And what, in terms of where we are in the congressional timeline for the Arizona settlement, we've had the hearing on the House side, but there still has to be a markup and a vote from the committee moving that legislation forward in the House. So that's going to have to happen in September, because that's when Congress goes back into session. And as I understand it, there will be no meeting scheduled in October on the Hill, because, I guess all the attention is going to be focused on the election. So that makes September really, really important for our timeline. And it makes it exceptionally important that we get the markup on the House side in September, and that, all of our pieces of legislation move forward or are ready for action by Congress as a whole. And then that takes us to the Senate side, right? There hasn't been a Senate hearing for, we don't even have Senate legislation for a New Mexico settlement. And there hasn't been a Senate hearing for the Arizona legislation. And there will also have to be a markup in the Senate as well before either of those legislations are actionable by Congress before the end of the year. So it really just gives us a few weeks in September to get the hearings and the markups that we need done for those legislations. So everyone, please say your prayers and do your part, do what you can to make sure that everything continues to move forward for us. There's certainly opportunity, but it's just, our challenge is the timing. And we don't want that time to run out before the end of the year for our settlement. So that's what's happening.
Oh, I'm sorry. What would happen if the time runs out, if we don't get it up by the end of the year?
Then we would have to start over with the new Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It just will add more time. And of course, it's a lot of effort and cost, certainly, in lots of respects, just the travel to DC, and then also the time that our lobbyists are putting into this, the time that all of us are putting into it as staff members. This was really, as you know, for me, most of my time this year has been spent on trying to move these water settlements forward. And I'd love to be working on other things like housing or other very important work, legal work of the nation. But this is certainly the highest priority. So I made sure to make time for that. And we have a great team, and so they're continuing to move things forward. It's been a great experience working with this complex team and with this challenge of moving this forward in such a short timeline. But yeah, I mean, we have to keep moving forward. And one of the reasons why we want the Arizona settlement to move forward at this time is because we're going into something called, well, actually, it's very much underway, post-2026 guidelines for management of the Colorado River. And so we want to make sure that our rights, we have enforceable rights when we're having this conversation, so that when decisions are being made about how to manage shortages in water in the Colorado River system, our rights are being treated as enforceable rights and are being protected and aren't just being talked about as speculative and something that isn't fixed and enforceable and firm. So it gives us a lot more leverage to have our rights affirmed and recognized by Congress and the courts. So yeah, and that's moving forward. So whether we have a settlement or not, and again, I think we'll be better positioned for those negotiations if we have a settlement, securing us a stronger seat at the table, really. But
I think
try not
definitely, definitely
What is-
continue to work and do all the, like you said, good thoughts, prayers, positives. I mean, if you put those thoughts out there, definitely a true believer of making things happen. So, but you have been busy this week as well. On top of that, the thing that is in the headlines the most is regarding the uranium. Should we go into the discussion about what that process is and where we're at right now? Because I think that's one of the I've seen a lot of TikToks, and social media posts about this uranium. And I think there's a lot of confusions of what the process is and what the Navajo Nation leadership are trying to establish. So maybe we should move on to that because I know you were really busy with that this week too as well.
Sure. Yeah. Last week, as many people know, Energy Fuels started trucking uranium ore from Pinon Plain Mine, which is just south of the Grand Canyon. It's part of the new monument that was established by President Biden, but it's an old mine. They have been in place since the 1980s, and so as a historic mine, they're exempted from the protections that would apply to new mining activities through the monument designation. So they have about 28 months, as I understand it. At this point, I'm not sure how much I can take what I've received from Energy Fuels as true. But as I understand it, they have 28 months worth of ore that they want to haul up to one of the last, actually the last uranium ore processing mills in Blanding, just south of Blanding, Utah. And of course, the most direct pathway is through the nation. There is an alternative pathway that would have them going through Kingman and then up through sort of the St. George, Utah area, and then cutting across through Zion, Bryce, and probably Grand Staircase, Escalante, and definitely Bears Ears. So we did broach discussions with the company to consider an alternative route, but there were monthly meetings that were happening leading up to this point, and in those meetings we were constantly assured that transport wasn't going to start until late fall, maybe early winter, and the volume of trucking is supposed to be 6 to 10 trucks a day. And these are tractor trailers hauling open back, basically they look like dump trailers, like how you would see gravel transported. And they're covered, the uranium ore is covered with a tarp that we're getting assurances is, protective. And so that's where you get into details, like, what do you mean protective? Based on whose standards? Like, is there actual movement of the ore from the container? We don't know the answer to those questions at this point. But in any event, the company started trucking early, much earlier than anticipated. And meanwhile, the nation has the Radioactive Materials Transportation Act of 2012. And we were in the process of developing regulations that would guide how the transport across the nation could happen safely. And some of that would include greater securing of the contents in the truck. And of course, having a safety plan that we would have access to. At this point, to my knowledge, there has been no safety plan that has been shared with anyone, even though, again, there were assurances provided from the company that there would be a safety plan provided in advance of the trucking. So we are in communications with the company. Once the trucking started, of course, our leadership responded immediately and pointed out that this is unlawful trucking that's happening right now. without the consent of the nation. And it's right through the nation. The trucks enter in Cameron, and they drive through Tuba City, through Kienta, and then head north up to through Mexican Hat and Blanding, on their way to Blanding. So I'm thankful for the strong response from our leadership. They certainly have raised this to the attention of the Attorney General for the state of Arizona, as well as the governor. And the governor had meetings with Energy Fuels, and reached some form of agreement with them that they would pause operation for 2 weeks, to have a conversation with the nation on how to proceed. That 2 weeks, as I understand it, is to expire on Tuesday. So I don't know what that means in terms of when the trucks will start operating again. But we certainly are taking measures here at the nation to ensure that there is safety for the public as things move forward. And we do have a meeting that we're in the process of setting up with Energy Fuels to talk through some form of an agreement on how to proceed safely and protective of the population. Of course, this is challenging because of the legacy of uranium development on the nation and its impact on the health of our people and of the environment. And so we're particularly sensitive to not only additional uranium activity happening on the nation, but also, just movement of uranium and radioactive materials onto and through the nation. So it's been challenging, certainly taking a lot of time. And there are some things underway that we had an executive order from the president. That was great, clarifying what was needed from the company. And we do hope that the company complies with that. If not, we will be prepared to respond. And we have some other actions that are underway as well to better protect the nation. And once that becomes public, I'll feel more comfortable talking about it. But just so everyone knows that this remains a high priority for the nation, and that we're doing what we can to make sure that the health, safety, and welfare of the public, as well as the environment, is protected. So it's been another really great team effort. Not quite as huge as the water settlement team and effort, but of course, of great importance. Yeah.
I think the challenge that I see that the current leadership on both sides, when we say both sides, legislative and executive, working together on these hugely important issues, I've been definitely impressed with, and especially how quick they are. There might not be an agreement on other areas, but when these types of things come on, they're quick to get together and to figure out a plan and move forward and support the Navajo Nation on these areas. And you're right. I mean, I think uranium water is definitely something that is a huge thing that we've been working for in order to have the water sovereignty too, as well, but also the sovereignty of our nation and of these types of transportations because of the history we've had with uranium mining, and that left our family members with suffering through illnesses and sicknesses that nobody should have. And so I think the leadership understands that. They hear that scary monster that our Navajo people have perceived as one of the challenges that we have here. So definitely, like I said, I'd like to extend my appreciation to the leadership moving together, as well as you, AG, because I know they pull you in pretty quickly on these important matters, and you know how to direct them very well and in an efficient manner. And definitely appreciate Arizona governor, getting on the phone, making her time available in order to go ahead and understand and hear these concerns and to assist the nation on that. So definitely continue to look forward to some more information on that. And I know we have challenges because it's not necessarily just Arizona, but it's also federal because you're transporting them across borders. So we have the other jurisdictions that we need to go ahead and work with too as well.
Yeah. And, in case people are wondering, I mean, a lot of this is the folks on the ground as well, like our law enforcement, and they've
Oh,
just
yeah.
been really great. Deputy Chief Leonard Williams out on Western side has officers that are at the border monitoring, making sure that there are in fact no trucks moving through. And if there are trucks that attempt to move through, they will be pulled over and turned back. So, that is in place and will remain in place until we're able to work through anything with the company, to make sure that we have the policies and practices in place for safe transport, so that we're not, exposing our people, or otherwise endangering the public in this process. So,
Yeah, and definitely encourage the public to be safe and not necessarily take matters in their hands because it does not only put themselves in harm, but also the officers, or the employees as well too as well. So I'd like to kind of make that comment on there. Um, those were huge things going on this. I actually wanted to go ahead and have a little discussion and ask about the Office of the Attorney General. I mean, I know a lot of times people are wondering what is really the position? What does the Attorney General opinions mean? What do they do and what's their function? So I definitely would say, and then let's maybe have a 5-minute discussion regarding that.
yeah, absolutely. One of the key authorities of the Attorney General is to issue opinions. And for folks who are not law trained, what an opinion is something, it's a conclusion, a legal conclusion that an attorney arrives at after legal analysis. And in the Navajo context, certainly we are looking at statutes, resolutions, what you would call black letter law. So you look to the text first, and try to arrive at an answer based on the black letter law. And then if there is not a clear answer based on plain language reading of the law, then we are able to employ Diné fundamental law to help guide our interpretation. For example, if maybe there is something in black letter law, but it seems inconsistent or doesn't seem to make sense when read together, then you can use Diné fundamental law as an interpretive lens, for example, to harmonize the black letter law and make it make sense, essentially, utilizing those principles. And so one of the principles is, that the law should be clear, writing should be clear, communication should be clear. And so you read the statutes to make sense. And then, of course, there is the principle of and the principle of how our leaders are supposed to interact with each other. And of course, this week we did address in an Attorney General opinion a question that related to the balance of powers at the nation. And so we had to look at how our leaders were interacting, look at the black letter law, and think about, and some of the law at Navajo relates to each other differently, right? We have categories of law that are considered organic law and can only be changed by the people, for example, through an initiative process. And so that law kind of has special meaning and significance when read alongside other laws that are not considered organic law that can be changed by the council, for example. And so, you get your question, and you do your analysis based on the plain language of the statutes, and you give the organic law the weight that it's due, and then employ the interpretive principles, or sometimes there is no black letter law. And at that point, you are able to use Diné fundamental law as sort of the source of the law. And in this particular analysis that we did, there was a lot of black letter law. So we were able to use Diné fundamental law as an interpretive lens to kind of look at the law as a whole and decipher what was meant, particularly taking into consideration the balance of powers, particularly as established in the Title II amendments. As everyone knows, in 1989, there arose the need for greater balance of powers and separation of powers, really. And so the laws that came out of that, primarily in Title II, have that weight as organic law of the nation. And so we looked at that, and we always post our opinions on our website. So that opinion should be up there, and it had to do with a budgeting question. But in terms of what that means and what an attorney general opinion means in particular, in the absence of a court ruling, the attorney general is able to issue an opinion that is treated the way a court opinion would be treated. Essentially, it's a clarifying analysis that says, here's the question and here's the answer, and then the analysis of how you got to that answer, and a statement of the authorities that were relied on, the law that was analyzed to come to the answer or the conclusion. And so, when a question is presented by an entity of the nation, then that entity and anyone who relies in the government on that opinion is protected with the authority of the opinion to basically, if they follow the opinion, they are following the law until there is a court decision that later reaches a different conclusion as to the state of the law. And so it really just provides clarification as to what the law is.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's important to also make note is that the Department of Justice, or the Office of the Attorney General, that the office provides legal services to the three governmental branches of the Navajo Nation. I think sometimes there's perception of them saying, oh, you're anybody saying that you're working for one branch or another, and that's definitely not the role of the Department of Justice. And I think the current Office of the Attorney General, I'm sure previous ones, understand that, like you're saying, it's basically in order to go ahead and read the law that was provided and to provide guidance or clarification in those laws, as is after you do our legal analysis of and coming up with that opinion. So I definitely feel that and I'm in our current administration at the Office of the Attorney General, we definitely do take that that responsibility of being the legal department for the government, which includes all three branches, very seriously in our representation, because I think that's the goal of the law, or officers of the law, is to, provide that balance, provide that guidance when others want to perceive, am I interpreting it correctly or am I not? If somebody says, well, I don't think that that's quite right, this is how I read it, well, then let's go ahead and go to the Department of Justice and let's provide the questions needed so that we can get the legal guidance and move forward on that. I definitely see that that's the role of the Department of Justice, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. The department's role is as a stabilizing factor. It should be as a stabilizing factor. And as you say, representing the nation as a whole, not one particular branch, even though administratively we are located within the executive branch. But, for example, with judicial branch, we represent them in their 638 litigation. We assist the legislative branch as they request. Sometimes we help in drafting legislation, or if there is a litigation matter, then we assist with that. It's challenging, certainly, having multiple clients, particularly clients who may not always see things the same way.
Well, and I think that's important. Like you said, the Department of Justice is located under the executive branch. However, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General are confirmed by the Navajo Nation Council and serve at the pleasure of Navajo Nation Council along with the rest of the branches. But any, like you're talking about, opinions that have been set, if it does go to litigation, like for instance, an opinion, then the judicial branch can check the Department of Justice as well as looking at that. So I think it's well balanced to show that we are there for all three branches. I think there's even a check and balance on that, on the legal department too as well. So I think our predecessors, our leadership who set up these types of checks and balances had a lot of thoughts on how to go ahead and preserve the balance and the guidance of the Navajo Nation government. In that way, it definitely preserves the services to the Navajo people and being able to go ahead and protect their services and understanding that government will continue to move forward and have trust in that. So I think that was a good point that you pointed out, AG. I will leave you for the closing remarks. Getting onto this, we were like, okay, let's talk about this. Now I kind of want a little bit more time.
I know. Well, there's always next week. There's always next week.
Absolutely.
Continue our conversation. And we will have updates probably on all of these things next week. So I think we should just have another session like this.
Continue it. I think that's great. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you, AG. And I'd like to go ahead and definitely state my support in being in a partnership with you. I think it's been great. Definitely appreciate you as a leader and have learned a lot from you, as well as being able to, along with our AAGs and our attorneys at the Department of Justice. I've definitely been impressed with their dedication, their understanding, and their openness too as well, because I know it gets a little difficult when you change management maybe every 4 years, but they're a great bunch of attorneys and appreciate their understanding of where and what purpose we're looking to move forward with the Department of Justice. So thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much. The attorneys at the department, particularly the AAGs, they just have such a deep understanding of Navajo law, and it's such a joy to work with them. And of course, to work with you, you're just she's a wonderful, wonderful. I want to say like deputy, but just a wonderful colleague, period. It's such a joy working with you. So thank you for accepting the role as deputy and for all of the grace and just the wonderful way that you fulfill your role. So thank you for being a partner in all of this.
Thank you. My pleasure. All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your opportunity to listen in on our Lunch and Learns. And if you guys have any topics that you would like to go ahead and understand a little bit better, we're definitely always willing to go ahead and consider those. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, everyone.